Okay, it should work now. Hey gang, am I audible? Can I be heard? No booing in the chat, ooh. So, hey Arcte Super Dark, hey Bailey, hello Albert, hello Jocelyn, hello everyone. Welcome to, the first Flowers Fanfiction Theater in a while that is not part of that Swedish Royal American love story, as, we finished that last week, thank Christ. So, to celebrate, I'm going to be reading from the third Big Fanfiction Center, the only one I have not explicitly read from, Archive of Our Own. Alright. Making sure that I'm visible and I can still access my mouse. I'm gonna close this so it doesn't bug me. So, we're gonna start off with this one I found back in my, Hamilfan days. Hi, Streamlabs Dashboard. Hi, Streamlabs Dashboard. So this is a Hamilton fanfiction called Helpless, and it's supposed to be like a retelling of Elizabeth Schuyler and Alexander Hamilton marrying. And it's, from my memory, it's just a trip for so many reasons. And I want this to be a little more of a chill stream than usual, because I'm all frazzled-dazzled. I do not have any alcohol with me, because if you were here at yesterday's stream, you would know it got a little weird. So I'm just gonna abstain for a little bit. Oh, thank you for the eyeshadow compliment, Arct. So let's read. Helpless by Flicker in the Dark. FM, teen and up. Marriage, courting, dating, cute, fluffy, sex-laden, Ron! Crosspost on fanfiction.net, but I don't care. Summary. A fluffy series detailing ELIZA Schuyler's and Alexander Hamilton's courtship and marriage. How they both come together and grow to be a strong couple and people. Note, we'll get a bit more graphic in later chapters, but nothing too graphic. Notes. So this will be a very lighthearted and fluffy series. The story, this is the story of ELIZA and Alexander's courtship and eventual marriage. I played around the timeline and events. Note, all characters will look and dress like the original Broadway cast, because this takes place in an alternative universe where racism doesn't exist, apparently. Enjoy. Arc Everone's overall look is much better than fanfiction.net? Yeah. I mean, the fanfiction.net look has not changed in the 11 years I've been aware of its existence. Compared to, like, Wattpad and this. Chapter 1. Spotlight! But, Angelica, I don't wish to go, I said to my sister as we were dressing. They call my ranch 'cause I'm dressing. Dressing up for things always made me a bit uneasy because I had no idea about fashion and always felt as though I was in the wrong type of dress. Isn't that relatable? Ew. Aren't you being relatable with the slave owner's daughter? Ew. Eliza, love, you must go. This ball is meant for us to find a husband. Jesus fucking Christ. And I'm sure it will be fun, Angelica said, brushing my hair. I told you this was going to be a trip. But you know how I am. I'm shy and never have the correct words like you do, I said, fidgeting. Well, you never will unless you get to practice, Angelica said, with a bobby pin between her teeth. Actually, wait, do I have a bobby pin here? I might actually have a bobby pin. Here it is. Well, you never will unless you get to practice. This is so uncomfortable, I can't. I waved an embrace of human whites to my fellow man who will. I'll be an old spinster like our great aunt, I shuddered. I mean, as a childless spinster, I relate. Listen, I shall help you. If you see a man, I will help you get acquainted. How does that sound? Angelica asked, kissing me on the cheek. I nodded. Suddenly, our third sister rushed in. Which gown do you think is best? Peggy said in a rush. Peggy had recently been called pretty by some young gentleman and was now very self-conscious about how she looked. I'm sure that will be relevant later in the story. I think the yellow one, I said, turning around mid-brushstroke. Hey, stay still! I agree with your restless sister. The yellow would look lovely on you, Angelica said. Are you sure? Peggy asked. I wouldn't want to look the fool around him. You couldn't possibly look foolish, I said, taking the other dress and handing it to a maid. Slave. He was passing by the room. We're already the clowns for partaking in this musical. Hey, Energia, we're reading Curse Hamilton fanfiction. Quite sure. Who is this gentleman you so eagerly want to impress? Angelica asked. Oh, a man I saw on the streets last week. This past week, my bad. Peggy said, slipping behind the changing screen. I saw him in the streets. I want to see what he's like in the sheets. Guess that makes it a fic of a fic of a fic. I mean, yeah, probably. Ron Chono's Hamilton fanfiction, which was developed into a musical fanfiction, and this fanfiction came out as a result. Aaron Burr? I said, cocking an eyebrow at Angelica. Ha 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 ha. Eliza, you shan't mention his name, or you, Peggy. He is a man who is so secretive yet boisterous about his advances, she said. He should not be trusted. I wonder why. I wonder why. No, not Burr. Don't worry, Peggy smiled, coming out from behind the screen. The yellow did look lovely, and I knew this man, whoever he is, would think so too. Hang on, I gotta check. Oh. What the fuck is going... Why is the internet saying that it's non-existent, but the internet is doing okay where I am? Hang on, let me check something. Yeah, it's just glitching. It's just glitching. Thank goodness. But who? Come over here and let me brush down your flyaways. Girl talk, Angelica said, motioning for Peggy to sit where Eliza had been sitting. John Lawrence, for fuck's sake, Peggy said bashfully. No, really? I said, putting earrings in. Yes, he was so sweet to me. He handed me a pamphlet and said I looked lovely, Peggy squealed. Angelica and I shared a secret glance. A glance that said, there she goes again on her own, going down the only road she'd ever known. Oh. I mean, there's no glitches on y'all's end, right? Just making sure. Peggy was the most boy-crazy girl in the family. If any man so much as acknowledged her existence, she was head over heels for him. Oh my goodness, it's almost time! Angelica said, flitting about, checking herself. That night, the ball had commenced. I stood quietly making polite conversation to many people and dancing with many cats, because again, she's gonna be a spinster. But none struck my fancy. I was thinking the night was over when I saw a man. This man was medium height. What even is like medium height for a man? I'm 5'7", and I know the average height for a male is 5'9". I guess 5'9" would be medium height then. Well, I'm just a long girl. And seemed to walk with uncertainty. He was wearing the familiar Continental Army uniform so many were wearing that night. Probably like 5'3" back then. But again, this is an alternate timeline with the actors of Hamilton, so I'm guessing it's modern day medium height. So 5'9" in this context. In other contexts, it would probably indeed be 5'3". Eliza? Eliza! Angelica said, coming over and noticing my distant look. Yes? I see you're looking at that man over there, Angelica said, pointing. Rude. I suppose I was, I said, blushing. Don't point! He'll see us! Baka! Isn't that what you want? Yes, you should go talk to him. I've shared a word with him, and he seems reputable, Angelica whispered. Oh, I couldn't. He would think me a mouse in comparison to himself. He wouldn't want to spend a moment with me, I said. Secretly, I wanted to know him, but I hadn't the courage. Give me a moment, won't you? Angelica said, patting my arm and walking towards the man. What is she doing? She said she would help, but now she's talking to him? Angelica seemed to be striking up quite the conversation with this man. He seemed to be quite interested in what she was saying. I am done for. What is she going to do? I feel so helpless. I actually do not remember how Helpless goes. I do not enjoy that song. The only two good songs, actually the only three good songs in Hamilton are My Shot, History Has Its Eyes on You, and Burn. Burn is the best, because that has no Alexander Hamilton lyrics. Suddenly, I saw Angelica was leading the man over to my area. In a rush, I said, Elizabeth Schuyler, it's a pleasure to meet you, Baka. Schuyler, he said, looking back at Angelica. My sister, Angelica smiled. Thank you for your service, I said, holding out my hand. He kissed it softly and said, If it takes a war, if it takes fight, a war for us to meet, it will have been worth it. It bothers me so much more than I think it should that this isn't all written in verse. Well, actually, back in my Hamil fan days, I used this service called Noteflight to create an orchestra adaptation of, like, Hamilton works. Do y'all want to hear it once I'm done with this? Let me know. I'll leave you to it, Angelica said, exiting at the right moment. Elizabeth, I have not properly introduced my space self. I am Alexander Hamilton! He bowed. Oh, do call me ELIZA! I said. ELIZA! You look lovely, he said, looking me in the eye. No one had ever looked at me as though I was pretty, except for my sisters. This is significantly less cursed than the Swedish American love story, but somehow still manages to be more cringe. Less curse for more cringe. That's all I have to say about it. Would you want me to, rap Alexander Hamilton's dialogue? Because fuck it, I have nothing to lose. I'm a bit frazzle-dazzled. Thank you, I said, smiling. Seriously, do you want me to rap Hamilton's dialogue? Alright, still doing good. Oh, I mean, sure, give it a hot. Oh, okay. My stream dialogue, my chat replay did a stupid. Hang on. Okay, there we go, I think. Would you do me the honor and allow me a dance? He said, holding out his large hand. That would be lovely, I responded with lightness in my voice I was not used to. We danced and it seemed as though everyone had their eyes on us. Angelica shot me a smile, and Peggy, who was also dancing, joined us to form the circle part of the dance. Whatever that is. Seriously, what the fuck is wrong with my phone right now? Lars' hand. Just one. The night was seemingly perfect. That evening in my room, I was filled with a warmth I am sure Angelica is used to with her many suitors. I had placed my dress on the chair and wished I had looked a little nicer. If I had known such a man would walk into my life, I might have taken more care. I went to bed with the stars aligned and a feeling that maybe he was the one. Everyone out there, eyes on you. I love like how not subtle the references to the lyrics are. The next day, my sisters and I were all in the foyer. I was practicing piano, Angelica reading the pamphlet she received the other day, and Peggy looking into a mirror examining her supposed imperfections. My lord, it seems as you have a letter, our father said, coming into the room with a letter brought to you by the Department of Redundancy Department. For me? I questioned. I never received letters. Angelica was the only getting letters sealed with wax. He handed me the letter. The letter did not bear a seal, but I did not care. Like a bee to a flower, poetic, my sisters rushed around me. I suddenly felt as though this was meant to be a private, and I held the letter close to my chest. Please, let us have a look, Peggy said in a faux whiny voice. All right, but let me read it first, I said. All right, I'm gonna wrap this. Actually, I'm not gonna wrap this part. Dearest Elizabeth Schuyler, I know allowed me to call you ELIZA this past evening, but it seems in writing your name should be written in the fullest. I hope my immediate letter has not startled you, but I had to write to you before the image of that night has left me. You were resplendent, and you have warmed my thoughts with your beauty. Let not last night not be the last time I see you, and that I may continue to write to you. Most sincerely, Alexander Hamilton! Well, Peggy said, trying to pry the paper from my hands. Needless to say, he enjoyed last night, I said coyly. He must have really liked my mouth and what I can do with it. Though my coyness didn't last long. In fact, I dropped the act almost 10 minutes later. When should I see him again? Well, Father will be having another event next month in celebration of the men going to war, Angelica said, not looking up from her reading. But I don't know. I have not read the letter, so I don't know if he is even worth seeing again. Fine, I said, passing the letter over. She read it, and her eyes lit up. My goodness, I do think you should see him again. His writing alone is brilliant. The broken English is brilliant, Angelica said, handing the letter to Peggy. Peggy gasped and looked at me with eyes of longing. Next month seems like forever, I sighed, resuming the piano. I think it is good. Gives you both time to think on last night and to not be too hasty, Angelica advised. The two is not grammatically correct. You could always write him back, Peggy mused. I wouldn't want to seem too eager, I replied. God, fucking hell, 18th century social norms are so whack. ELIZA, don't be a passive woman. What have I always told you? Angelica said, looking up. You always say to stand up for yourself and use your words, I say in a monotone. Don't sound so bored. As a woman, if you want something like, say, a man, you must talk to him. You do not want a man who likes a quiet woman and expects her to just go along with what he says. Trust me, Angelica said matter-of-factly. So I decided to write him. Dearest Alexander Hamilton, your letter came, and I was content. I wish to keep in contact, as the next time I might see you is next month. My father is having another event, and I do hope you will be invited. I too had a lovely time with you. You seem to be a man not like the ones, apostrophe S, the one I had been introduced to before. I wish to know you more as letters are passed. Adieu, ELIZA Schuyler. Done, I said, sealing the letter. End of chapter. God, this is cringe. Next chapter. Chapter 2. Writing a letter nightly. I do. 1 week later, I was writing a letter nightly, but that paled in comparison to the many letters Alexander wrote me. It seemed he wrote 2 a day because I always received 1 letter a day. Ha ha ha. Dearest Elizabeth, only 3 more weeks until I shall see you again. Excuse the amount of letters you will have received. Because this is borderline stalkerish, in my opinion. I hope this pace isn't displeasing to you. If you should think I am being too liberal with my letters, I shall stop immediately. Just tell me when. It is just so many wonderful thoughts come into my head I must share with you, but I have written too much about myself. Please tell me how you are. I hope your life in New York is quite nice. I am currently stationed down south and quite miss New York, and I do wish you and your family well. Yours, Alexander Hamilton. I was writing so much I often questioned myself, think up just the right words. I did not want to waste precious paper and ink with nonsense. Father had always taught us to never write anything down unless it could be erased. Funnily enough, the pencil gets invented. My thoughts were filled with him. I longed to have a proper conversation with him face to face and see his reaction. The first conversation, I was just filled with the nuance and wasn't in the right mind. I wanted to talk to him about who he was and what he stood for. My distraction was so bad, Becky replaced my powder with flour as a trick. LOL, I guess? I mean, some slave is probably going to die from using the powder in a pastry, but ha 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 ha, the sisters are being sisters. Isn't that so adorable? Ha ha ha. What'd I do? I did something. Oh, I know what I did. Okay. Boop. Peggy! I turned around. I knew it was she because she was the little trickster. Angelica had called her a little monkey when we were younger. Yes, she answered sweetly. Why is there flour in my powder? I asked a bit harshly. I quickly wiped the flour off my face. I looked foolish. It's so funny to me how Hamilton fics have as much knowledge as history as royalist fanfic writers have for the countries they write of. Burn! Take that, Crystal Smith! Angelica and I made I bet that you were so distracted you couldn't notice. I was right, Peggy said in a loud voice. Why are you shouting? Angelica asked, coming into the room. She put the flour on her face, Peggy giggled. Eliza, you really must be more focused, Angelica gently scolded. I thought the best of you. That my grounded sister wouldn't be carried off into fairy tales, and look where it got me. She cocked an eyebrow at me, and then grinned. What you owe me, Peggy said, holding out her hand. Knowing things is not conducive to writing fanfic. Okay, that's unfair. Fine, Angelica said, leaving, returning, and handing her a small candy. Angelica had received a box of sweets from a suitor and kept them in hiding. She knew this winter was dull, and we would try to find them. I know, but I cannot help it. You must know what it is like, I said as Peggy handed me my face powder and began to apply. Okay, good. It was not, put into the flour. Actually, no, she said nonchalantly. Really? I paused. She had a million suitors. Surely one had sent her into oblivion. Yes. What about that lad a few months back, or this most recent suitor? Nope. But they're gifts, Peggy sighed. I do not care what they give me. It will not change my mind, Angelica said, folding her arms. But you've spoken to loads of gentlemen. One must have caught your fancy. I pressed. Eliza, I am looking for a mind at work, and thus far I have found nothing but sponges. It was true, I realized. As soon as any man was seen, he was just as soon gone. My sister was the oldest and wittiest and the biggest gossip of the city, but she seemed to have control over every situation. I wished that were I, but perhaps I could be witty in my letters. Fanfics are the doctorate level knowledge on literally everything, or 100% facts rock, nothing in between. I mean, it can be both at the same time. Crystal Smith had a shit ton of sports knowledge, but no knowledge on how the Sweden Royals worked. Dearest Alexander, I too miss you. My sisters and I are managing here and wish you well. Here in New York, the winter is quite harsh. I hope you are warm wherever you are, but please spare a thought for me, and perhaps you might feel my warm thoughts. Please continue with the letters, as it is all that keeps me engaged in these long, dull winter days. My sister, Angelica, says she has read Common Sense by Thomas Paine, and she finds him to be quite inspiring. She wishes you to reel some of Voltaire's work if you have the opportunity. Yours, Elizabeth Schuyler. My sisters noticed I was often alone in my room writing, and so they often accompanied me there. Eliza! You mustn't alienate yourself. You will see him soon, Peggy said, pulling my arm to move me from my desk. Peggy! It is dark, cold, and frankly dismal. All I have is his letters, I mumbled. I was in the middle of a letter and was trying to think of something new that was happening. But the only thing interesting that happened is I found a dead mouse. That's interesting. That perhaps I wouldn't send this letter. You know, I have been reading a book about the Arabia and the Persia. It says some of the cultures had harem. We could form a harem. Angelica mused, looking in my direction. Do you think any of the high school aged fans of this musical know what a harem is? Ha! I laughed, but Angelica didn't seem to think about Alexander as much as I did. I'm an idiot. In fact, he often sent her a letter in addition to mine. Those letters debated politics and the nature of religion. They quite bored me, but they made Angelica happy. I'm just saying, if you really loved me, you would share him, Angelica pouted. It was my birthday in a few days, and my sister Angelica bought me a large, beautifully painted box. Well, they definitely do now. It is to store your letters, she said. I needed it. My letters were piling up on my desk and were getting dirty from ink spots that I've accidentally dripped from my quill. This box was thoughtful. It was oak with tiny blue flowers painted on the edge. Dearest Elizabeth, happy birthday! I hope this letter arrives sometime near your birthday, but either way I wish you the best birthday regardless of the day you might read it. I write to you with great sorrow. I am not there to be with you on this day. I wish I had a gift for you, but when I see you, I shall give you a gift then. I will give you something you cannot fathom. I hate to be so far from you at such a joyous time. I apologize for this letter to be so short, but paper and ink rations are low and I must save mine for the war effort. I shall either write to you when I can, or I shall see you as planned. Yours, Alexander Hamilton! And that was it. I did not receive any more letters. I sent one daily, as usual, but I received no word. It got much worse when we all learned the ball would not be until spring. The troops were snowed in for the winter, and the war kept them away. It burned my heart to not hear or see him. No period. When was Elizabeth Schuyler's birthday? I'm now curious. It was in August. Her birthday was in August. This author didn't even bother to look up Elizabeth Schuyler's actual birthday. Reminder that schools did field trips to this show when it was on tour. My school did not. It was a big public school, so it wouldn't have flown, but, yeah. Weeks went on and no response. This winter was even harsher as usual. Harsher than usual. Everyone's rations were low, and my letters were also rationed. I hoped Alexander was not suffering too much. Next chapter! Hopeless by Flicker of the Dark, Chapter 3. My heart went boom. Notes. I shipped Peggy and John Lors because Anthony Reyes and Jasmine Cephas Jones are so cute together. Another fluffy installment, so if cheesy romance is not your thing, I direct you to some of my more serious work. Reminder, I modeled the dress and looks of the characters after the original cast. These are my interpretations of these characters, which may seem out of character, but are how I imagine them. Please excuse any historical inaccuracies, slightly modern speech. No, fuck you. Most are intentional to further the plot or simply be enjoyable. Enjoy. Fuck you. It was finally... Well, I imagine public schools wouldn't have been able to afford it, even with the school discounts. Yeah, probably. It was finally spring. I had not heard from Alexander or his platoon. It flickered through my mind that he might be dead. No, I cannot think this until I have proof. Be rational. But at night a letter announcing his death pervaded my dreams. But I was being foolish. I had barely had a conversation with him, and yet I cannot stop thinking about him. The bell. The ball. Was tomorrow. And the moment of truth would appear. Tomorrow I could put my silly thoughts to rest and finally return to who I was. I was not this girl who swooned over men. Imagine if there was a... Do you mean a sporking of Swedish American Royal Love Story? Or commentary? Because I might return to that, like, at the end of this year to do the drinking game. I was a shy girl who kept to herself and not Angelica. Angelica! Over the winter, I had been busy fixing up an old gown. I hadn't the heart or desire to ask for a new gown when soldiers went without proper winter clothes. So I fixed up my blue gown and added green to spruce it up a bit. My sisters did the same, and we looked brilliant. That night, I tossed and turned. Don't get you hopes up! That winter, many of my father's friends had lost loved ones in this war, or simply never got any news. So instead, I thought about what I would say to him. Perhaps, oh, I have missed you, dear, or I have perished without thee. But no, I would probably flounder over my words, and besides, that wasn't what I sounded like. Next morning was chaos. My sisters and I spent the day in Angelica's chambers because she was the oldest and had the biggest room and mirror. Did you eat? Angelica asked, after my stomach had made made a quiet, unappealing sound. No, I responded. Eat! Angelica said, pushing a biscuit in my direction. At least they aren't going shopping. I mean, they can't go shopping. There's a war going on. I can't. I won't fit in my dress. Don't be foolish. You couldn't get a pound with all your worrying and flitting about these past weeks. Besides, you will feel sick, and we wouldn't want to finally reunite with this gentleman not feeling your best. Angelica said. I ate the biscuit in part because I was a bit puckish and would quiet Angelica's motherly instinct. While lovely could be suffocating under high-stress environments, Angelica always became like a hawk whenever events came up. I knew it was because our mother never really mothered us, and Angelica wanted to make sure we were taken care of. I hate corsets, Peggy said stiffly, walking over to us. I do too. Perhaps we won't wear them, I said, teasing. Both of you? Angelica said, pointing to both of us. Don't worry, Angelica, Peggy said. I know. It is just this night has been in the works for some time. I would hate for these men to come back to chaos, Angelica said, pinning her hair back. This was maybe the 5th time she did this. Angelica, despite her self-confidence, was fussy over her hair. Finally, we were all dressed. We were to all stand in the ballroom and wait for our guests. People began to fill the large room, brought to you by the Department of Redundancy Department. I saw many familiar men. Peggy found her beau, and Angelica started up a conversation with the disreputable Aaron Burr. I knew she was not attracted to him, but they always were talking, most likely debating politics. I scanned the room again, and to no avail. I decided to walk towards Angelica. Perhaps I could spend my time being enlightened by those two, but most likely not. As I turned and started walking, I felt a hand gently grab my shoulder. I turned around, about to shoo whoever touched me when I saw him. Alexander! I said, my eyes wetting. ELIZA! He said, his voice matching my amazement. You're alive! I surprisingly began to cry. No tears. He handed me his handkerchief, and I dabbed at my eyes. Sorry. I thought you had passed. I thought I would too. I do apologize for the absence of the letter. I'm sure that did not help. That is of little importance now, I beamed. He took my hands then and brought me closer to him. These actions seemed to imply we were quite close. In reality, our last real conversation was only maybe 30 minutes in total, but it seemed I knew him, if only for his letters. I can't believe you are here. I was so worried, I gasped. Neither can I, Alexander said, leading me to some chairs so that we might sit. He pulled out the seat for me, and sat. These actions seemed so perfect, as though we had rehearsed it. It already felt like a comfortable gesture, and out of formality I sat through like many men who fancied me. Never mind. Senpai did not notice Elizabeth. Alexander noticed her. Being a Skylar meant men could not stop courting us, because y'all are rich slave owners, and by consequence every encounter felt forced. How I missed you, he said, looking me in the eyes. I missed you so much. Your letters were all that kept me sane these many weeks, I smiled. This is my demo reel for acting, by the way. During the frightful winter, the only warmth came from your letters, and I cannot imagine how I could have possible made it through, he replied. But I shall not darken this occasion with my experiences. I wish to spend more time with you in the moment. Yes, without past or future, I replied, hardly knowing what I was saying. How poetic, he said. I was sitting in utter awe. This night was going better than expected. So pardon my forwardness, but where does your come from? I asked. I detected a slight accent. Unimportant, really, he said. I noticed how you averted this question and didn't pry further. All secrets reveal themselves. My past is of little importance. The future is where I seek. There in the future, there are a million things I haven't done. Just you wait. ELIZA, you'll be there too, he said. I noticed how he said I would be there. It was touching that he saw me in this ambitious future. I'm sorry, I had to. White girl tries to rap, fail compilation. Is my thing glitching again? It's not glitching again, good. Oh no, you seem to have a goal, and that is something most men do not have, and yet run into the future headlong, I replied. Oh, ELIZA! Your words, Alexander said, smiling. Never have I heard a woman with such beautiful language. Then my sister came up to us. Except perhaps your sister, he smiled. I want to fuck her. What about me? Angelica inquired. I was just saying how you Skylers have such a grasp for poetic words, he said, kissing her hand. He cheated on ELIZA right there. Flattery. Angelica scoffed, but she did blush. That night was magical. After Angelica finished a brief conversation about Voltaire with Alexander Hamilton, she left us. In my ear she whispered, "What a mind at work, indeed." "May I have this dance, Miss Schuyler?" he said, rising from his chair and slightly bowing. "You may, Mr. Hamilton," I replied. It was charming that the lengths Alexander went to prove he was a gentleman. He took my hand and we began to waltz. Around and around the room we went, the golden light illuminating Alexander's brown eyes. When the two short song ended, he let a faint kiss brush my cheek. Not my teeth, my cheek. Sir, that is most improper, I said, teasing a little. You're right. It only seems we have known each other since time immemorial, he said. Whatever that means. The next dance began, and again he asked me to dance with him, which I obliged. This dance was more lively, so whilst dancing we talked. It seems my comrade Mr. John Lawrence has taken a fancy to you, lovely Sister Peggy, he mused. Seems my sister has taken a liking to your comrade, but as well, I said. It was true. I had not seen Peggy alone all evening. For once Peggy and I were the ones dancing and not Angelica! May I say you look lovely, Alexander said, guiding me in the dance. Thank you, though. You are flattering. I am dressed no better than anyone here, I said graciously. Not because of your attire, though quite pretty you are, he said, not looking me in the eye this time. He was blushing a bit. Ew. I felt so helpless. This felicity left me without a thought in my head. I did not even notice when the dance ended, and Alexander had to pull me into him to get me to stop. That's how the song goes. It's canon. The night's end was drawing near, and every time the clock sounded another new hour, I was more saddened. I hadn't been in the company of Alexander for so long that now I cannot imagine him leaving. Adieu, Alexander said when he left. Adieu, Francois, I replied. It had been established we were both versed in French. Francois, I hope now that I am not so far, our letters will not cease, he murmured. Never. That evening, as my sisters and I were getting ready for bed, we discussed that night. Oh, John Lauren is so sweet, Peggy said as she was brushing her hair. You two did look content, I said, picking the pins out of my hair. And I saw another couple looking quite content. Angelica said, looking in my direction. Bye, Super Dark, thank you. I hope the story will get more cringe next week. I'm probably just going to finish this all here. It's only like 6 chapters and we're already on chapter 3. So I'm probably going to finish this in one go. I felt her gaze without turning. My sisters and I had that keen ability. To see Alexander was not dead or missing was such a relief. Angelica, did you have a good time? Did you have a good time? It was all right, Peggy. I was mostly skirting from one conversation to another. I was avoiding a gentleman who I had courted a while back. I do not think I could get caught in a one-sided conversation about how he would make a good husband. She sighed. Yes, thank fuck. I do wish you found someone that does not make you irritable, Peggy said, coming over to hug Angelica. someday perhaps. Eliza! I have some good news. Burr told me that Alexander would be stationed in New York for a few months. That Aaron Burr that you said was disreputable? Yes, Eliza! That one. That is good news indeed, I squealed, despite the fact that he's disreputable and therefore he could have been lying. This made me so happy. I could see him more if I permitted. Could it be too much to hope if I could court him? Could it be too much to wish for him to propose? I was being foolish again. One moment at a time. How could I wish to be his wife when we have not spent more than 12 collective hours with him? I hoped this wouldn't disappoint me and be a beast or boring. The mere thought of spending eternity or even another few hours would be bliss. Next chapter. Chapter 4, yes. So I'm assuming Alexander proposes in this chapter. But yeah, after this, we only have 2 chapters left. Blessings in chapter 6. So we're definitely going to finish this today. It's the end of the chapter for notes. Okay. I saw Alexander quite soon after that evening. In fact, we saw each other rather regularly, but I never tired to see him and him to say, "Hello, Eliza!" He apparently became acquainted with my father due to General George Washington. It was made apparent that this Alexander Hamilton is quite welcome here, according to my father. This was quite a nice arrangement. Sorry for being so gassy. Alexander did not just visit me. He visited with Angelica to discuss various authors and the politics. I saw how Alexander got so excited. People in the house had to tell him to be quieter. Angelica finally found someone who shared her views. Well, that's a stretch, given the standards at the time and the fact that, again, y'all are the daughters of slave owners. That's a stretch. It clearly says all men are created equal. If I should meet Mr. Jefferson, I should have some words about including women in future works, I heard Angelica voice during one conversation. I agree. Piss off! Of course he didn't agree. He also had many conversations with Peggy, but I haven't the slightest clue to what they talked about. Peggy was happier after their chats. I had asked her if she fancied Alexander once, after a particular conversation where she seemed lighter. She denied, saying he was just a good conversationalist. In the bedroom, too. So when Alexander showed up at our doorstep, it was not considered improper. I didn't quite like this more casual visiting, though I never visited him. But though I thought they were more casual, I never met him without out looking my best. I had never liked to brush my dark hair, but when he came, I brushed my hair so it would shine bright like a diamond. After I finish this stream, can someone please just create a highlight where it's just me and all my singing? Someone please do that. Or clip it or something. Miss Schuyler. Alexander, said bowing and bringing forth a bouquet. Hello, Mr. Hamilton. No need for such formalities. I curtsied to mirror his bow. I wish to. As a woman of your status, I must. I am a lowly servant at your service. He bowed again. As he raised his head, he was smiling. I was smiling now. Alexander, these are quite lovely, I said, and I noticed the red rash on his hand. Spoiler alert, it's poison ivy. At least whoever wrote this isn't 100% clueless. I'll give them that. And they based this more off the musicals. They based this entirely off the musicals. Sorry. So my historical standards are drastically reduced. This is just cringe and terrible. Where did you get these? I picked them near where I am staying. A large field with the loveliest flowers that made me think of you, he said, trying to hand the bouquet to me. My dear, you seem to have sticky nettle in that bouquet, and it seems to be giving you quite a rash, I pointed, rude. Ah, so that is what hurts. I thought I had merely scrapped it. Now that you mention it, it is quite painful, he intoned while picking the nettle out. Come in, sir, and I will see what I can do. I smiled, accepting the bouquet at last. As we crossed into the foyer, Peggy crossed us and saw the state Alexander was in. Nettle? Yes. See, I told you floral arranging classes were useful. No, I have just been stomping around in fields long enough to know what singing nettle looks like, Peggy replied. I shall go fetch some bandages and salve. And by salve, they mean snake oil. I can see why my friend John enjoys talking to your Peggy, and Alexander said, sitting at the small table. How so? He says she is direct, and I see that is true. John is always going on about how no one says what they mean. Spoiler alert, John dies in the end. She is direct, I said fondly. Here we are, Peggy returned with a box of bandages and an assortment of lotions. Thank you, Peggy, we both said at the same time. You are both welcome. Peggy turned and left. She knew I wanted to have private chat and obliged. All of us had a keen sense of what each other wanted or was feeling. Let's get you fixed up. His hand was very red and had some bumps. He clearly touched a lot of the plant and had not noticed the sting until it was this bad. In a few minutes, I had cleaned and bandaged his hand. I couldn't help but notice Alexander wasn't looking at what I was doing, but at my face. He was smiling a bit the whole time, and I became very self-conscious. Done. Thank you. It feels much better. So what brings you to our abode? Today? Well, today I come on the most important business. I looked down. I had hoped this would be a light-hearted, business-free affair, but one cannot keep the sun from rising, so I must face this. Do you remember that letter I sent you many a month ago detailing my regret for not attending your birthday? Her birthday, that's in August, not December, or whatever. Yes, today is of importance because I wish to rectify this. I have brought you a very late birthday gift. Watch it be like the wedding ring. We're married now. Fuck you, he said with a grand gesture. You mustn't. My birthday is of no real importance, and besides, being with you is gift enough for a lifetime, I blushed. Whiter and blushing, I turned an unslightly pink color. My bluish was almost the same color as Angelica's ball gown she wore when I first met Alexander. I must give you something, if not for a birthday gift, but to repay you for the kindness you have done me and knowing you, he continued, nonplussed. With his good hand, he produced a thin box. It's gonna be an engagement ring. Fuck. The box had no ribbon, and the box seemed quite battered, but I accepted the box inside a splendid fan. Alexander, this is too much. I must return such a beautiful gift, I said, opening the fan. Okay, I was wrong. The fan was light blue with white and pink peonies. The image on the fan displayed a lovely garden. I placed the fan back in the box and made to hand it back. This is mere tuppence, Alexander beamed. But how did you get this? If I am correct, this is a French fan. You haven't been to France so much as you told me, I inquired. It was not hard. I wish I had worked harder to bring you this gift. I have a friend named Lafayette, and he is a French ally. Lafayette had one run over on my request, Alexander continued. Likely story. It is so beautiful. I opened and closed the fan. The brilliant colors so vivid, it was like the flowers are real. Hang on, let me get my fan. I actually use this in a future video, so you have that to look forward to. The brilliant color so vivid, it was like the flowers were real. They were made by poor people. I gave the fan a slight wave, and I felt like royalty. Fans were used for courtship back then, so I don't know what this is trying to say. Imagine if it's just like a sex thing. Its beauty pales in comparison to the one who wields it, he uttered with finality. Over the next weeks that stretched into summer, more gifts came. Gifts not only for myself, but my sisters. Gifts like a pail of silk slippers or books did not come cheap, and yet these gifts came. Angelica and Alexander had taken to borrowing books from each other. Peggy received gifts from John Lawrence through Alexander. It seemed John did not have such freedoms as seeing Peggy as I did with Alexander. Well, because he's gonna die. Alexander, you really must stop. One does not have a bottomless bank account after all, I scolded. Credit cards didn't even exist back then. You are correct. I may not be the richest man in the colonies, but I must certainly try for you. I wondered where his wealth came from. I hoped it did not come from draining his meager military salary. He had told me some weeks before that he was from a poor family in the British West Indies. Nevis, he had said. I had learned he went to war to try and establish a legacy. It had been moaned that he was a poor man and he should not be with her, a lady of fine upbringing, but Alexander had gained a reputation with Washington and so was overlooked he was not of wealth. But one day, to my shock, he came bearing one final gift. It's gonna be the wedding ring. But one day, to my shock, he came bearing one final gift. Elizabeth's Schuyler. I realize you wish the gifts to cease. I shall respect that after this final one, he said, withdrawing a ring from his pocket. I gasped. Could it be? Eliza, you are a gift in my life. Without your presence in my life, I think I should have perished last winter. When I saw you for the first time, I knew you were not just a privileged fool. I knew you were worth more than anything God, he's canon, has given us. He paused, catching his breath. Elizabeth Schuyler, if your father consents, because again, this is the 18th century, the standards were different back then, will you marry me? The world stood still. I was helpless. This is what I wanted, and to have it now seemed all too perfect. That's the song, it's canon. I do. Yes, I will be your wife. He slipped the ring on my finger. It was nothing too big nor flashy. It was a simple yet lovely ring, which he would have shown, but that would have led to character development. Looking at the ring, I said with tears in my eyes, when shall you speak with my father? I arranged to speak with him tomorrow evening, he said, wiping my tears with his thumb. When Alexander left, I was still crying tears of pure joy. I walked back to my chambers, and my sisters were inside. They must have heard the whole ordeal. Eliza, Peggy said. Congratulations. Peggy came over and embraced me. Angelica came over as well, but she seemed hesitant. I cannot believe this. Did you know? I asked, finally drying my tears. We had a good idea. Angelica tightly smiled. Jealous. But this is foolish. He hasn't asked father yet. Father could very well reject this proposal. I do not think I could live if I knew I couldn't be with Alexander, I worried. The scene with the dad in the musical sucks so bad too. It does. It really does. I worried. Father is nor cruel nor a fool. He will do the most best and most rational thing with facts and logic. I cannot think for the life of me why he would say no, Angelica said, holding my hand and looking me in the eye. She always did that when I was worried. Angelica was right. Father wouldn't say no for no reason. How will you keep this from father until tomorrow evening? Peggy pondered. It was decided I would stay out of the view of my father. It was quite easy during the day, and in the evening I would ask as usual. You could have just not worn the ring. That would have been easier. I doubt father would have been angry if he found out sooner, but it was customary to ask the girl's father for permission before proposing to the girl. And what Alexander did wasn't the usual course. Look at how progressive he is, ooh. Ladies, his dating apps are open. I saw that Angelica was very quiet the rest of the day. When I asked her if she was all right, she said, Yes, ELIZA! I must be. They got like 5 layers to hide that ring under, too. Like onions. Ogres have layers. I did not know what Angelica was thinking, but she retired early because she was depressed that she couldn't have Alexander to herself, because apparently that's the narrative Lin-Manuel Miranda wanted. Fuck you, Lin-Manuel Miranda. But my elation and worries fled in my mind in her absence. Angelica always kept me calm and rational, but with her gone earlier, my mind started fretting earlier. Notes. Thank you all for such lovely support. I like to think Alexander established a friendship with all of the sisters. Wouldn't you? I wanted to show Angelica's lingering feelings for Alexander. I do not think, knowing her sisters, that her feeling would have gone unnoticed. Yes, I know weddings proposals were very different back then, but I am only going off the musical canon. The musical canon. The explosive one, not musical canon. Friendship! My Little Pony! I used to wonder what friendship could be. My Little Pony! Historical inaccuracies aside, please enjoy. Next chapter. Chapter 5, Blessings. I know weddings took a while to plan, though. Okay, let me finish reading this note. This will be a long author note. Apologies. These 2 stories I felt weren't warranting of 2 separate updates, so I combined them into 1 chapter/update. I know weddings took a while to plan and that wedding gowns weren't necessarily white, but a girl can fantasize, right? I mean, when you're fantasizing at the cost of historical whitewashing, then that's very problematic. I rushed the process of the wedding because I want to get to the good character moments. This wedding is very reflective of modern Western weddings, so ignore historical inaccuracies. I am half going off the musical and half my own brain. Of course, Hercules Mulligan wasn't the flower girl. But in show clips he is, so I am going with that idea because it is adorable. That's cringe! I did use direct lyrics, but I changed them to 1, fit more in with the language of the time, and 2, be creative! All characters look, sound, and dress like the actors unless otherwise mentioned. Enjoy. We were all sitting in the living room. My father, Alexander, Angelica, Peggy, and myself, all expressing different emotions and in various states of stress. My father was stone-faced and listening to Alexander asking me if he could marry me. Oh, look, it's the scene, Albert. It's the scene! My father was the perfect master of his emotions. Hand resting on his chin and leaning forward only conveyed what he was listening. Alexander looked the part of the gentleman, but sounded different. Alexander stood at military attention, but his voice expressed wild enthusiasm and loudness not common in a perfect gentleman of society. His voice slipped into his accent from the West Indies. He usually spoke like any other colonist, but when he was excited and forgot himself, I could see his true self, peak, though. Angelica wasn't looking at the conversation. She was looking at the ground and rubbing the cross she wore. She seemed more distant lately, but perhaps she had the same nerves as me. Peggy was fiddling with her hands. Peggy seemed restless. Perhaps it was due to the occasion, or maybe it was just because she was sitting still in silence. My mind was so busy thinking out all the outcomes that I barely heard the conversation. I had sniffix light. Sure, it is true I am not a rich man, and no, sir, I do not intend to leave the employ of General Washington once the war ends, if he permits it. I hoped I would have the grace to accept father's refusal. I would simply be calm and let Alexander go. Let it go, let it go. Perfect master of his emotions and owning human beings. Yes! I could see how father would say no. Alexander was poor by all accounts and was not of notable birth. Alexander was not going to bring me up in status, which is what parents wanted for their daughters. Then Angelica grasped my arms. I saw my father get up from his large armchair and walk over to Alexander. Mr. Hamilton, if what you say is true and you are a man of your word, I give you my blessing and marry my Elizabeth if she will have you. But if I should hear one word of unhappiness from my darling, you shall rue this day. Are we quite understood? My father said in a solemn voice. Yes, yes, Master Schuyler, Alexander gasped. He much thought he didn't have a chance to receive my father's blessing. He shook my father's hand a little too long before my father good-naturedly let go. Elizabeth, he is a fine young man, my father said, beckoning me to come over. He embraced me and looked me in the eye. He looked happy for me and said he was letting me go. Let it go! Let it go! Thank you, Father! I embraced Alexander. I gasped so hard because I thought I might fly away from happiness. He was clearly wearing some cologne I had given him, and the smell now meant he was mine, and this moment could happen every time we embraced. After I let it go, Angelica embraced him, followed by Peggy, who he spun around at arm's length. He looked so elated that he was doing it in every way he could. Thankfully, my father had left the room when he broke into a slight dance of elation. The dance seemed random and silly, but he looked so happy. Angelica and I were embracing now. My eyes were closed so that I might remember this moment forever. Peggy let out a small squeal of excitement. The wedding was set and had been planned. We time skipped a lot. Tomorrow was the day. It was to be a fairly simple wedding as the war was still happening. We chose nothing too extravagant, in part because of the cost, and in part because I didn't need anything too fancy. Oh, how cute. I was never one for large displays of wealth or affection. I am shy and do not like everyone looking at me as Angelica and Peggy do. I was always worried people would notice everything wrong with you, senpai. My side of the church would be quite full, each row filled with aunts, uncles, and grandparents. I envied Alexander. He knew and was close with everyone who filled his solitary row. He had all his war friends, who I had met and found very charming. We had his friend Hercules Mulligan be the flower girl. It was meant to be a joke, but when we joked, he said, "No, I am serious. I will be the flower girl if you wish." I want to die! We frantically tried to recant our statement, and he said, "Nonsense, I'll do it for my favorite man and his lovely bride." I want to die. But this arrangement pleased all of us. My sisters were my maids of honor, and Alexander had John and Lafayette! But it seemed Alexander was more nervous for the wedding. I saw him flit about making sure the flowers were all perfect. He planned most of the wedding since I did not have a particular style I liked. I had simply said blue and white and that I liked peonies. He told me he wanted things perfect for me, but I secretly thought it was justified to himself he wasn't a street rat who had no taste. He seemed to be doing a lot of proving himself to my family and me. Angelica would have been micromanaging her wedding. She knew what she liked and went with it. Peggy would love planning her wedding. She would be very meticulous and self-conscious about the color combinations. But I simply wanted to be married as quickly as possible with Alexander without being watched every second. I could not wait for the long, candid conversations or being close to him. I'm sorry. I swear to God I am not drunk. I promise. My sister Angelica quite enjoyed planning the meals. I told her nothing with tripe, and she planned an exquisite meal. I could hardly wait for tomorrow night's meal, but I could not eat anything all day. I was filled with nerves. I was most worried about my dress fitting. Angelica, do you mind doing one more dress fitting? I want to make sure it fits and everything is sorted, I said as she was consulting the cooks, who were also probably slaves. They were discussing if they needed to add more salt to a soup. The meal was so large that they had to begin cooking the day before. I felt a little guilty that I should have such a meal while many did not, including the cooks, who are slaves. Well, Elsa, your dress is lovely and fits, but if it would ease your nerves some, then of course, give me a moment. Grab Peggy and you two start. She smiled. I grabbed Peggy from the parlor where she was talking with John Lawrence, who dies. My father had graciously allowed Alexander's guests to stay in our home. Since he had less than a dozen guests, it did not make sense to house them elsewhere, especially since they were soldiers and we had enough rooms. Peggy was pleased by this, since she was not afforded the same luxuries of being with John as I did with Alexander. Father said she was too young to get caught up in courting and that next year she could. How old was she at the time? Oh, suck. (1758), and Elizabeth married in 1780. So she was like 22. Okay? Peggy sighed when I explained to her what we were doing. I knew all she wanted was to be with John. Peggy had cleverly told her father that she wanted to help with the wedding, and she stuck away to fold napkins in a place John happened to be most of the time. They had sex. I stood on the small stool as Peggy helped smooth the edges. My dress was light blue, almost white color, long sleeves and a simple veil. It was quite simple, given my family status. My aunts had fussed that they had dresses with train a couple feet behind them, and that their veils were silk with diamonds, shone bright like a diamond. Fuck. But I brushed their concerns away. It was my wedding after all, and they had Peggy and Angelica to fuss over during their weddings. 2 more weddings to be more extravagantly planned would surely make up for my humble one. You look absolutely lovely, Peggy squealed. Are you sure? Does the hem look even? Don't fret, I stitched the hem myself, Angelica said, coming into the room. Angelica, despite hating embroidery and sewing, was very good at it. My sisters and I all worked on my dress. They had offered to make the dress as a wedding gift, and I could not imagine anyone else doing a better job. You look like a princess. Ugh, Peggy sighed. She was fluffing my veil so it billowed up before falling gently down like snow. Oh, I have a gift, Angelica said, bolting off. When she returned, I said, I told you, no gifts, Baka. This dress is gift enough, and besides, you and Peggy are the greatest gifts. Gonna check stream health real quick. Alright. Everything's good. She put a finger to my lips and revealed a box. Inside was a pair of lovely pearl drop earrings. No, I couldn't accept, I gasped. These earrings had been given to Angelica by our grandmother, whom we all loved. As a child, I had been jealous. Angelica received the best jewelry, and I was left with a necklace with a rusty cross. Yes, I insist. She said it was to go with the one who had a kind heart. She said I was kind, but she was very wrong. Eliza, you are one of the kindest people, far kinder than I, so you deserve these, Angelica said, closing my hands around the box and pushing them toward me. I hate this. I put them on and they were lovely. Peggy was lost in daydreams of princesses. When I get married, I want my wedding to be just like yours, Peggy said. Peggy, do what you want. Do what you and John want, I teased. Spoiler alert, John dies. She thought she was private about her love for John, but we all knew. Push, she said, battling the comment away. That night I was a mess. Sleeping was impossible. I tossed and turned, but I heard something and I turned. I noticed a folded sheet of paper was suddenly on the floor, where and there had not been one a minute ago. It must have been pushed under the door crack. John dies at the end. If you get that reference, bonus points. Cautiously, I got up and took the paper. I noticed it was a letter. It was dark in my room, so I went out into the hall where the candles were still burning. I saw on the clock it was 1:30 a.m. I knew no one would be up, so I sat down in the hall to read it. If anyone should see me, it would be improper, but I was sure no one would see me. Brought to you by the Department of Redundancy Department. I opened the letter and read, Dearest Elizabeth, this is to be my last letter before we are to be married. If you are awakened when this is delivered, I apologize. Secondly, I had a friend deliver it, as to not see you before the wedding. I hear it is bad luck, and I shall not have bad luck on such a perfect wedding. Eliza, I cannot imagine not seeing you, but I am eager to be with you for eternity. I never had anyone until you. ELIZA, I don't have $1 to my name, or an acre of land, a troop to command, a dull of fame. All I has my honor, a tolerance for pain, and a couple of college breaks in my chub-notch brain. It is insane, your family brings out a different side of me. I've been living without a family since I was a child. My father left, my mother died, I grew up alone. And as long as I'm alive, ELIZA, swear to God, you'll never feel so helpless. That's how the song goes. It's canon. These are my vows to you. I know we did not write vows, but I wanted to vow something to you and you alone. I wanted a private promise only for us. I know I am not what some in your family consider a proper spouse, and I wish to please them as much as I can by acting as though I am not what I have previously mentioned. But when I say, I do, tomorrow I am agreeing to what the priest is saying and what I confess now. With love now and always, Alexander. I'm sorry I had to. I held the letter to my chest as if it were the first letter I ever received from him. His words made me feel so helpless. His words were true. I had become the gossip for marrying someone from an unknown family. People tutted that I should not be marrying someone like him. Family told me I was making a mistake. Neighbors told me I was too good for him. People who had no business frightened to try and correct me. But I pushed these words away. For once in my life, I could ignore people's judgments and focus on what made me truly happy. And with Alexander, nothing was wrong. Alright, last chapter, bitches. Chapter 6. Okay. Note is irrelevant. Wake up, soon-to-be Elizabeth Hamilton! Peggy screamed as she hopped onto my bed. I must have fallen asleep once I returned to my room. I noticed I was still clutching Alexander's letter and quickly folded it and shoved it under my covers. I felt this letter was meant just for us. Peggy! I grasped in surprise. She used to do this as children, especially around Christmas. She would wake me up and then we would tiptoe to Angelica's room and do the same thing. It's your wedding day! Up, up, up! Angelica said. I hadn't noticed, but she had joined Peggy in this ritual. I would miss this. Our silly antics, our jokes, and shared times were now things of the past. I knew I would see my sisters often since Alexander and I were staying in New York, but I knew many who lost their friends once they got married. I hoped being sisters, this friendship wouldn't change. Only 6 hours, Peggy squealed. I saw the clock. It was 9 a.m. The wedding was set to be at 3, dinner reception until 7. After that, Alexander and I were to depart to a country house General George Washington had graciously allowed us to stay for the week. I'm going to get some water. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. We had both declined, saying it wasn't our place to just move in, but he responded good-naturedly. Nonsense! That house lies empty more than 10 months a year. Martha and I want you to stay there. Just only a week, and if you like, you're welcome to it again if it suits you. But sir, Alexander said, I insist! It's the least I could do for my right-hand man and his lovely fiancée. So we accepted. I was quite excited now. The journey would take roughly 2 hours, but that was time I could spend with Alexander properly alone. Up, Angelica said. I was now sitting up and had been daydreaming. I got up, and from that moment I had barely time to breath. Angelica was trying to make me eat various things. I won't have you passing out during your wedding, she said, pushing a bun toward me while Peggy was trying to put makeup on me. Angelica, I'm a little occupied, I said just as Peggy came in with lip color. My sudden movements made Peggy lose concentration, and a line of faint pink color was over my chin. See what you've done, Peggy said, wiping off the color. You're right, we are bombarding her. But Betsy, love, please try to eat something, Angelica said, backing off of the food and moving to my hair. I'll eat later, I said briskly. Tisk, tisk, came Angelica's usual sound of disapproval. It was time. We had arrived at the church, and I was now standing next to my father. Peggy and John had already walked down, followed by Angelica and Lafayette. Hercules followed, throwing rose petals and smiling. At least someone didn't have nerves. I looked behind the doorframe and saw Alexander wringing his hands and awkwardly smiling at Hercules. Hercules good-naturedly threw a rose petal at Alexander as if to tell him to stop worrying. Alexander flicked it back at him to tell him thanks. It seemed Alexander and his friends were like his brothers. Fucking hell. Ready, Betsy? My father asked. I jerked my head back and I nodded. I could see my father was sad to give me away. Betsy, are you ready? You know I could put an end to all of this if you wished. I wouldn't be angry, dearest, my father said, grasping my hand a bit firmer. I'm sure. I wasn't. My nerves were too much. It wasn't the fact of marrying Alexander, but I wasn't sure. My father noticed me apprehension and beckoned Angelica to come back. Angelica quickly walked to me and pulled me aside. I'm sorry for holding up the wedding, I stammered. Shh, she said, holding my head to her chest and rubbing my back. What if I'm jumping in too early? Nonsense. Eliza, you know I would never lie to you, so listen well. Alexander is the right man. You two deserve each other. I knew you were meant to be with him from the very first moment you two saw each other. But I am not you. If you truly think this is not the right course of action, I will not blame you for waiting. Understood? You're right. You're so good to me, I said, straightening up. I love you more than anything in this life. I wouldn't be here encouraging you if I didn't think it was the right choice, she said, pulling away. She kissed me on the cheek and walked back to her place. Angelica knew just what to say. I gripped my father's arm and we walked out. Everyone stood, everyone smiles. I knew this was the right thing. Trump's election fraud falsehoods now have cost taxpayers $519 million. Cool. Wonderful. That was to be expected. Alexander stood still for perhaps the first moment I had ever seen him. He was always jostling or tapping something, but now he stood straight and confident. We exchanged vows and rings, which he was shown, but that would have led to character development. It's I love you more than anyone in this life. When he slid the ring on my finger, I noticed his hands were a bit shaky. I calmed me to know Alexander was not completely over his bout of nerves. I now pronounce you man and wife. Alexander lifted my veil, and I saw him for the first time properly in nearly 2 days. I did not realize how much I had missed him, but his dark eyes were glistening, and as we kissed for the first time as a couple, I couldn't hear the organ music or the light clapping. I could only hear Alexander's breathing and his touch as he pulled me closer. Elizabeth Hamilton, I am the luckiest man, he said when we finally broke apart. Alexander Hamilton, I am the luckiest girl. The reception was so lovely. At one point, John stood on a table and tapped his wine glass. All right, that's what I'm talking about. Now everyone give it up for the maid of honor, Angelica Schuyler. A toast to the groom, to the groom, to the groom, to the groom, to the bride, to the bride, to the bride, to the bride, to your sister, who is always by your side, to your union, to the union, to the revolution, and the hope that you provide, you provide, may you always be satisfied. She paused then. She got a far off look as if she were thinking. To the best marriage anyone could have, she finished. We all clinked glasses with those next to us. Angelica was always so thoughtful. Dinner was served a few minutes late. It was simply the best meal I could share with Alexander. Alexander looked as if he never had such decadence. He took a whole minute just to sit there and stare at his plate. Bigot, I'm making the song clip compilation, aren't I? Yes, you are! Please do. I would absolutely love it if you do, actually, Albert. Please do. I took his fork and with a piece of fish, pushed it towards his mouth. When it touched, he came back from wherever he was and accepted the bite with a smile. What were you thinking about? Just how lucky I am to be alive right now and to have you, he grinned. Well, don't forget to eat! Gifts were more than I could ask for. Each gift was gorgeous and what I never imagined being given. Aaron Burr even sent a gift, despite not attending the wedding. Many regrets I could not attend such a glorious day. The gift was exactly what Alexander expected Burr to send, a set of law books. Soon it came time to leave. Our carriage had arrived and we were ushered out. Everyone wished us well. Have fun, my sisters whispered into my ear. Alexander helped me into the carriage, and he settled in beside me. As we heard the crack of the whip, we were off. We waved as we became farther and farther away. Suddenly, I had a thought. Alexander, we don't have any bags or trunks of clothing with us. I can't wear this wedding dress the entire week. I took care of it. I went out yesterday to drop off our clothing and necessities. Apparently. That's why he was not available the day before. Don't worry, love, he said, kissing me again. You mean to say, I left you with my friends to have one last drink and then departed to make sure everything was set for when we arrived, with help from your sisters, of course, he smiled. You were out at night nearly 4 hours just to get ready for tonight? Alexander, you shouldn't have. We could have unpacked, I stammered. We could have, but why should I make my Eliza fret about such simple matters? 4 hours is nothing in comparison to our life together, he smiled. Wow, isn't he such the perfect gentleman? I then leaned my head against his shoulder. The rocking of the carriage was so calming, I closed my eyes. Are we getting that bar scene too, I wonder? I think we're getting a sex scene, and then it ends, if I recall correctly. Unlike Crystal Smith, this author had the balls to write a sex scene. I then heard Alexander reciting something in my ear. Yesterday, I was alone. Today you walk beside me. Something still unclear, something not here has begun. Suddenly, the world seems a different place, somehow full of grace, full of life. How was I to know that happiness can come so fast? I got a copyright claim for what? Oh. I love how I keep getting like content ID'd from videos I have since privated into my crypt. My singing was too good. Where was I? Trust in me the way you do. I'm so afraid of failing you, just my Eliza, whom cannot know the danger followed where I went. There are shadows everywhere and memories I cannot share. Nevermore alone, nevermore apart. You have warmed my heart like the sun. You have brought the gift of life and love, so denied me. Suddenly, I see what I could not see. Something suddenly has begun. My DMs are open for voice inquiries. Must have fallen asleep because Alexander was whispering to me, "Love, over here." I sat up and stretched. I had not meant to fall asleep. I had meant to spend the time talking to Alexander, but I was just so content how could it not happen? I had meant to spend the time talking with Alexander, but I suppose the stress from the past weeks finally washed away. His poem was so lovely that I turned and kissed him on the cheek. I made to get out, but Alexander waggled his finger at me. He got out and came to open my door. I wouldn't have my Eliza getting her dress muddy, he said, picking me up in his arms. I saw the ground was damp, and a fresh, earthy smell filled my nostrils. I noticed this country home was quite large. My family had a country home, but it was smaller. I loved the country because it did not smell of sewage and rotting trash. I remember the fun I used to have with my sisters running about in the tall grasses. He carried me easily and flung the door open. This house is lovely. You must give me the address of George and Martha. I must thank them again, I said, reveling in the house. There was just enough light so Alexandra could light a match and go around and light the surrounding candles. The candles were all lit, and it felt cozy. You must be exhausted. We should retire, he said, examining my face. Oh, I couldn't possibly be tired. Not after my little nap, I smiled. Well, I suppose you'll want to freshen up then, he said, holding his arm out for me to take. He led me upstairs and into the master bedroom and began lighting candles and lamps. The room was large and well furnished. Martha certainly has an eye for decoration, I said. Yes, but there was one thing she didn't have to make this house perfect. He paused and then turned to me. You. Aww, isn't that so sweet? How did everything he said to me made me melt? I then walked to the large mirror and began to work at the pins tangled in my hair. Stop. I did, and he pulled his chair out for me to sit on. I tried to resume my hunt for the pins, but he shooed my hands away, and he gently took the pins out. Slowly, sections of my dark hair fell back into place. Angelica, always being prepared, had secured my hair with extra pins and all other unnecessary gadgets. As he removed my veil, my head felt lighter, and my head stopped hurting. I sighed in relief. 78 pins, he exclaimed. I will never understand this witchcraft. Woman, am I right? I was surprised as well. He began to brush my hair, but he was brushing it like a horse's mane, yanking and tugging. Love, I am not a horse. Do allow me, I said, taking the hairbrush from him. He laughed apologetically. I expected him to move around or occupy himself, but he simply stood behind me, smiling. For the second time he stood motionless, and then he realized what he was doing. I apologized for staring. No, don't. I think it's sweet. When I was gone, I got it to start freeing myself from my wedding dress. I went behind the screen in the corridor to change. I know we're married, but can I just change in front of him, or do I not? I wish someone told me what to do in this instance. That is why sex education is important. I thought a door opened, sorry. That is why sex education is important. Therefore, you can know if it is proper for you to undress in front of your spouse on your wedding night. I realized then there was no hope of getting out of my dress without help. Normally, Angelica and Peggy would be there, but this time I was alone. Alexander, I called from behind the screen. Yes, I could very much use some assistance, I said sheepishly. Without pause, he came behind the screen and began to do the back of my dress. I thought I should feel some embarrassment, but I didn't. This has been a Flower Gotham PSA. Yes, yes. Suddenly, I was down to my underwear, and I felt self-conscious suddenly. I turned around to him, and he looked concerned. Eliza, what's wrong? You're all red, he said, brushing my teeth. Brushing my teeth. Why do I keep saying teeth instead of cheek? Quite fine, just nervous, I guess. Nervous? I am standing here in front of you in my underwear. I gestured to my current attire. Oh, right, of course. I think I forgot because I was just thinking about tonight. He said, looking down then. He nimbly began to undo the laces of my stays. How do you wear this contraption? He grunted. I will never know, I giggled a bit. Finally, the laces were simply cut, and I could finally breathe. I had been uneasy about my dress fitting and had my stays extra tight. I realized that was grossly unnecessary, and with a large meal was probably a mistake. I began to remove my stockings and felt the cool night air on my calves. Alexander seemed thoroughly enraptured in what I was doing because he was standing in my shift before he even started to work on his night routine. They cut the lace open? I have never worn a corset before. I do not know how they work. Are you not supposed to cut the lace open? I mean, I guess that would make sense because that would, like, damage the corset to the point where it's unusable. But I haven't, like, ever worn a corset before. You just loosen them. Okay. but he was interested nearly a quarter of the time it took me, because he is man. I returned from the next room after washing my face to find Alexander in only a nightshirt. I was in my usual nightgown and was incredibly self-conscious. I never noticed how thin the material was or the low neckline. My sisters were the only ones who saw me like this. It now dawned on me why Angelica offered to make me a new nightgown. I brushed her off, saying it was a waste of fabric in wartime and that I wouldn't care about Alexander. I was wrong. Also, they used stays back then? What the fuck is a stay? Oh. Those are like... I'm sending you way too many historical fashion videos later. Thank you, Albert. I really don't know jack shit about this shit. So basically, they're just a kind of corset. Okay. "Eliza, ready for bed?" he said, coming over to me. I nodded and he scooped me into his arms. I noticed he had turned down the bed and he placed me on the white sheets. He lay down beside me and turned to me, propping himself on one shoulder. "Eliza, wanna fuck?" "We don't have to," he said nervously. "We must. It's our duty as bride and groom," I replied. I had read books that said a man and wife must lie together or their marriage was not official. "No, Eliza, I just want to make sure you are happy. I try so hard to do right by you," Alexander said, taking his hand and gently brushing my face. I moved closer to kiss him. "I want to." This is the one thing Angelica never done, the one thing she knew nothing about. This is why sex ed is important. Fuck, no. So I was in a new territory I was unfamiliar with. He started to move my dress up and I felt my soul take flight. That's not how it works when you lose your virginity. When I lost my virginity, that is not how I felt. Alexander kissed me again and I was helpless. The whole world ceased to exist and now it was just us. Soon he was on top of me and I was holding my breath in anticipation. "God, Betsy, I love you so much. I love you, I love you, I love you," he said as he began to make love. I was no longer seeing Alexander Hamilton. I was seeing the man I loved. A feeling I had never felt bubbled up on me. I felt I was losing all control. I felt like a caged animal. Set free! I moaned and Alexander was sighing deeply. I feared Britain could hear us. Lie back and think of England. We finished both breathing heavily and content. Okay, that was not as graphic as I thought it was going to be. "Betsy, I hope that was not horrible." The guy said. "A book said it could hurt," he whispered. "At first, a little, but you made me feel so good. I feel sinful." I blushed. I felt a little guilty I should feel this good. "No, nothing you can do is sinful, my angel," he said, kissing me once more. "Look at where we started. You a young soldier, me a simple girl with 2 sisters," I whispered. "I can't believe we are here. I didn't think I could ever be where I am now. I always thought I was doomed to be alone and unhappy. I always thought I would be dead by now." "Me too, hun." "But now I couldn't imagine anything else," he said, gazing at me. I could never get sick of his gaze. He looked at me as if I was the only thing that mattered. "We have our narrative. We are a new chapter in the story," I said, smiling. "I hope someone reads the story then, if only for you," he said. Ha! Sometime later, Alexander was asleep and was facing me. He was so strange, this man. He wasn't like anyone I knew. I always thought I would marry some plantation owner and move to the country. No, I could see we were going somewhere new. I turned over and went to sleep. Alexander must have not been completely asleep because he reached over me and brought me closer to protective embrace, satisfied. All right, that was this shitty cringe fic. So, give me 1 second. I'll play the Hamilton arrangement I made when I was 16 or 17. I don't 100% remember. Okay, so this was my no flight account. The name is Flower Tyra. I have all of this bullshit. But we're going to be playing Selections from Hamilton, which has 825 views, 59 likes. Why? Alright. Complete! Though I might some bowings and more to the drums. Okay. Let's listen. I actually use like drums for the rap part, so I actually just like arranged this from the songbook that's like available on Amazon. Sorry, I'll turn the volume down slightly. Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton. There's a million things I haven't done. Or just you wait, just you wait. I love how like all of the strings are just playing the same rhythm. I might actually like sell this. I just want to remove like one of the sections because it's not really that good. But I would like happily like sell this arrangement to schools. So you pull this from the songbook, but you can actually read music. Oh yeah, I can. I played viola in high school and violin for many, many years before that, so I can read sheet music. For the most part. So yeah, I did this all myself. I just couldn't listen by ear, you know. I can't play by ear, it's really hard for me to do that, but I can read sheet music. If y'all want, like, I can, like, do a stream where I just play viola, old viola shit. It's been a while since I played it, actually. But I still have it. Aw, thanks, Albert. This is not a game. My sister, like I know my own mind. You can never find anyone as trusting her as kind. Every time that I live, she decides to be resigned.
this first time, with every mistake, felt the rain rise within, and even now I lie awake, knowing history has its eyes on me. History has its eyes on.
Okay, this is my least favorite part. This is the part I'm going to cut once I sell this. Because it does not sound good. Especially in the context of what we have. I'm actually gonna skip this part because I hate it so fucking much. So we're just gonna skip right over to Burn.
Myself from the narrative. Let future historians wonder how Eliza reacted when you broke her heart. I've torn it all apart, I'm watching it burn. The world was right to my heart. World has no place in my head. Before I know what I said, I'm burning the memories, burning the letters I might have redeemed you. You forfeit all rights to my heart. You forfeit the place in my bed. You sleep in your office instead, and only the memories of when you were
Okay, I remember this part was the hardest because this song is not in the songbook, so I had to like go on the internet to find like a free version of this I can use as a reference sheet. You can tell that I'm just a viola bias. I'm viola biased because this is a viola solo. I think it was mostly because, like, the violin parts are really high. So yeah, I don't remember how long that took me. Probably took me a lot. But yeah. I guess that's the end of the episode. So thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.
三日月のシャーレに星